Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options in Play video update. Happy Friday, first of all. Uh, it's been a kind of a busy Friday. We'll jump into things soon. Today's video is going to be about one of those busy stocks, one of those ones that's moving around today. It's going to be about Arista. Uh, the old saying goes, patience pays, and Arista for the strangle. We just need a little extra time. So some trades work immediately, and some take longer. I mean that's just the nature of trading. Uh, Obviously, we would love if everything worked out perfectly immediately, and you have an idea and it triggers and it works out, or you have earnings and you get in a trade and like the next day it does exactly what you want. But the reality is that it just does not always happen that way. Uh, Sometimes, yeah, you get that overnight huge move and you can close out the options for a nice gain. Um, but then other times it just like for whatever reason you can have a great plan and a great setup and uh, it just won't cooperate. That's the best way to describe it. Cooperate. So Arista kind of falls in that latter category, right? It didn't cooperate right away. But let's go back to why we were in it in the first place. So for anybody not familiar with Arista, it's a networking stock, typically very volatile. It's had a huge run over the last couple of years. You can see the further out I scroll, the better it looks, right? Uh, so you can see it had a really monster run, and this year has been a little bit different. Momentum stalled after kind of a weaker than anticipated February quarter, and really since that earnings release in February, I mean all of that all that momentum from the last couple of years has really started to slow. So you can see like the highs have increasingly gotten lower. Um, you know, Buyers have shown interest and kind of gradually stepped it up, but for a stock that barely paused over like a 2 year stretch, I mean, the fact that it hasn't really been able to, or hadn't up until that point been able to get up to retest a high, tells you everything you need to know. So, February earnings knocked it lower, and then actually back in May on earnings, it got hit again, but this time it bounced pretty quickly. You can see it got down to like the low of this pennant here, and it bounced. So over the last 6 months or so, you can see Arista's forming this really nice pennant here, really nice looking chart, and it keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So it's a typically volatile stock that's in an increasingly tight pennant formation going into earnings, and we knew going into the report that the options were pricing in about a 20-point move, give or take. So when we look at it, we see with the stock around 270 that there's a reasonably good chance that if it moves 20, either way, that it should trigger the pennant break out or break down. So what we mean is if it rallies 20 from where it was going into earnings, that would break through the pennant top and it should trigger a breakout, right? Or if it dropped 20 points from where it was going into earnings, that would break this pennant low, like this rising support level and the 200-day, and that should trigger a much more significant technical breakdown. So this is one of our favorite setups. We like these setups because the priced in move creates what we call the combo trade. So that's you get the priced in move plus the technical move on top of that. So you get the technical breakout or breakdown. And often in these setups, what we like to do are straddles or strangles because we're less clear on the direction, but we are more confident that it's going to be volatile. So we're more confident that it's going to move and less confident in which direction it's going to move. It's coming off of 2 quarters. So Arista was coming off of 2 quarters where it got hit pretty hard. But, overall, the stock was still in, like the longer you go back, the stock was still in like a pretty strong uptrend. So it's tough to be super bearish. It's tough to be super bullish because of the last couple quarters. So it was a 50-50. We weren't really leaning one way. We just figured that odds are it was going to move. So September call spreads on the upside, and put spreads on the downside. And what we like to do is, even though we would love, like we were like I talked about earlier, we would love for everything to trigger immediately and work overnight, so you could like close out the position the next day for a winner. I mean, that'd be great. But just having done this for so long, we've come to learn that giving yourself a little extra time, so like a little extra safety net. So instead of like targeting the really short term weekly options, going out a couple extra weeks, it gives you like the ability to still be in a trade that doesn't trigger immediately, and it gives you the opportunity to maybe catch a setup that takes a little bit longer to develop. So that's why for this one it was September main expiration. So that's September 21st, 300, 310 call spreads, and then 220, 210 put spreads. So let's see what happens. So we fast forward here. We'll go just a little bit. And what happens? The report wasn't, it was actually a decent quarter. We'll zoom in a little bit. It was actually a decent quarter, but the stock acted pretty bad. And you could see it dropped. It dropped on the first day, on the day after. So it reported after the close. It dropped the next day down to like this, basically like the pennant low, right? Pennant support. It wasn't bad enough to trigger that breakdown. So, unfortunately, I mean, like they were pricing in a 20-point move. I think it ended up moving about 10 to 12. So it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to pay the options on the put side. Obviously, the calls took a hit. And then the Monday after, so that was a Friday, and the Monday after, there was positive news. So they settled a lawsuit with Cisco, and then it gapped right back up. So, after 2 days, the stock was basically unchanged from where it went into earnings. So, puts lost value, the calls lost value, but importantly, there was still plenty of time left for this contract. So that that's why we like to say, like, even though we want things to work immediately, giving yourself a little extra time in case they don't can really help out sometimes. And this is one of those cases. Because, over the next, we'll do a little fast forward, over the next few days, you can see it does nothing. But it just keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter in this pennant formation. So, like the longer it does nothing, the better the move should theoretically be once it finally goes, right? Because it's like a coiled spring that, volatile stock that's basically flatlining and getting to like this really critical point. It's like when it breaks out or when it breaks down, you would assume like the move should be a sharp one, just because it's such like a pent up move at this point. So does nothing. This was yesterday. You can see it just started to tick higher. So when you kind of extend the lines, you can see it just starts to go. And then as is often the case, I feel like price leads the news. And then after the close yesterday, it was announced that the S&P would be included in it, in their index, and that was basically the catalyst needed, even more so than earnings, to get it going. I mean, you can see it gapped up to like 295. Basically hit there was two targets on the upside going into this trade. It was 300 to hit this first area right here. You can see that's right around 300 was the March high, and then the secondary target was to close the gap from February earnings. So that was just about 307.96. So about 308. So like those are the two targets, and it hit the first one right away, and then it actually later in the morning it actually rallied to hit the second target. So the call spread was closed out, and it was nice. It was nice that it worked out like that the way that it did, because as September wore, as we were getting to September and September wore on, if it hadn't triggered, then we would be in a position where we'd have to like manage the trade, and then it opens up a whole different can of worms. But now now, and so instead of rolling, because it hit both targets, so instead of rolling, uh, especially on a day like today when the options have really like gotten juiced because of this huge move. So now what we're going to do is going to want to wait and see if the stock pulls back and maybe consolidates above 300, because technically there could be about a 10% measured move above 300, which has been more or less the top on two separate occasions this year. So if it can hold above 300, you could see another maybe 30 points on top of it. So there is some meat left on the bone here, but we also would prefer to see either a pause or a consolidation and let those option prices, the implied volatilities, come back down, because they kind of got juiced today after a 30 point pop. People are bidding up options. So like now, we can we can be patient. We can wait. There's no need to chase in this market, and especially like a name that's worked out for you. You want to be just patient and wait for the trade to come to you. So we'll watch and see if it consolidates above 300 and gives another opportunity. Maybe like a month longer, so maybe out through October would be the plan. So we'll keep an eye on it. So for all of you that haven't checked out the webinar this week, please find that link in the text for the description for the video. There was a webinar from Tuesday. Kurt and I talked about different trading mistakes that we're trying to help you avoid, and also different strategies for event setups and trade styles that we're looking at. Also, there is a crazy deal going on still for the Options in Play newsletter, and also the newly launched education course. So please check that out. Kurt and I spent a lot of time developing the education course, and there's a lot of great information in there for traders that don't know a whole lot about options, but also for the little bit more seasoned traders that are looking to fine tune their game. We got some event strategies. We talk about different types of trades. So definitely check out the link. And this deal is not going to last forever. So please take a look. As always, if you guys have any questions or comments, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will talk to you all soon.